Not going to lie, I'm kind of dreading this one because I think it's going to be a really long one. Hello and welcome back to the Stitch Witch podcast. This is episode 2. I'm your host, Ourielle Stitch Witch. I'm going to preface this by saying I fully did not mean for this basically to be 1 month from the last video. I had every intention of uploading 2 episodes in between. One was actually right after election week, and then one was another week after that. And life got the best of me. I've been going through some family stuff, and so I had all that footage, edited it, and simply didn't make the thumbnails and everything. And so, push came to shove, it ended up getting like way too far from whatever point it was, and I just figured it'd be easier to start over. So I will start by saying this is going to be a very, very long video. I want you to sit down, grab a snack. My husband will be returning with breakfast soon, so if I take an intermission, it's because I need to have a snack. But my notes for this one are copious because again, like all that stuff had happened. Like a month of knitting has passed. Life has been stressful, things have been changing, and so that means that I had quite a lot of like stress knitting to do. So as of today, it's Thanksgiving in the US, so happy Thanksgiving to everyone who celebrates and observes this moment in time. It is, always nice to sit back and, take stock of what we're grateful for. I'm incredibly grateful to have this YouTube channel, and beyond this channel, I'm grateful for this knitting community. I was watching, I don't remember which YouTuber, but she was saying that she consumes so much like knitting YouTube that it felt wrong to consume and to not to contribute. And I feel like having this outlet to express my creativity and to share my thoughts and my rambling about knitting, because there are only so many people in my life that I can like yap their ears off about, yap my my entire life story too about knitting. Like there are a select number of people who are willing to tolerate that, and it's easier for us to do it here and have like a healthier outlet. But I've also met a lot of really wonderful people that I'm going to talk about later on in the video, because there are some knit-alongs that I am participating in, and it's actually been deeply transformative. So yeah, I think it's just been really wonderful to have this thing to come back to have a document of my knitting, to be able to see my progress, because even from a year ago to now, I think so much has changed, and that's just really fun. I have a couple of FOs to go through, so let's hop right in. Okay, I do apologize for getting up and sitting down so many times in a row. I think it's because I have prepared this list, but there's just so much stuff. Okay, the first thing that I have is actually a sewn object. This is just a regular old like pot holder, hot plate thing that you used to pick up your plates and set them down as a little trivet for your counter protection, And for me, I was getting to a point in knitting where my hands were getting really chronically sore. I know from the last video I was wearing those compression gloves. I have since purchased 2 more sets of compression gloves, so I have them at work, I have them in the car, I have them pretty much everywhere. But I was just getting really frustrated and I needed a break from my knitting, so I randomly picked up the sewing machine. I will tell you the story about what project inspired me to do that, but I figured before I actually like start making pouches and stuff, let me do something a little bit easier. And I started with this little pot holder. It's made with scrap fabric that I had at home. I don't know if you can tell. Also, don't look too closely at the lines. This was the first thing I've sewn in like 4 years, but they're little kitty cats. So yeah, this is just 2 layers of that pure cotton batting, and I'm trying to use double folded bias tape, but it's complicated to understand how to do. So it's not good. This is definitely not good. I want to make another one. I don't like how large apart the quilting lines are. I would love for them to be a little bit smaller. But I think for the first time in touching a sewing machine for 4 years, it's not terrible. I really just wanted to ease myself back into actually like knowing how to use the machine. Like how do you use the foot pedal? How do you throw the machine and all that jazz. So as far as I'm aware, my memory is still okay. It's kind of like riding a bike where I guess you kind of learn how to do it. And it's so like deeply traumatizing and difficult the first time that it kind of sticks with you. And my lines are certainly straighter than they were before, at least on this part. The circle definitely could use a lot more practice. I have still no clue how to use bias tape, but yeah, I don't think I've ever made something as straight and lined as this before. And of course, I forgot to mention the Olga sweater, which is the thing that I'm wearing right now. I finished this pretty briefly after the first video. Not as briefly as I would have, not as like quickly as I would have liked, but if you watched my video on stash management and knitting bingo, you will have seen that I pretty much have a whip wheel, which is a random wheel that I spin, and it allows me to figure out what project I'd like to work on. I can actually just show you real quick. This is the whip wheel, and it does make that really, really satisfying clicking sound. And I've been pretty diligent about using this, not all the time, because sometimes I know exactly what I want to knit on, and I have the steam to do it, but Oftentimes, I just know I have a couple minutes to knit and I'm not exactly sure what I want to do. And in those instances, it's really easy for me to, you know, pop it on, promise myself I'll do 30 minutes. 30 minutes becomes an hour because I've already gotten into it, and that's how I managed to finish this sweater. I wore this to work. If you're not aware already, this is the Oba sweater by Petite Knit. I knit it in Patton's Classic Wool worsted in 4mm needles. The colors are natural taupe and black, and it is a cropped, really like comfy sweatshirt style sweater. I made this not according to pattern, but according to a like old Target sweatshirt I had and I really, really loved. But yeah, I finished this after about like a month of wear, or maybe 3 weeks of wear, and I have to say I've probably worn it like 6 or 7 times. It's starting to pill. Yeah, so it's not like terrible. Yeah, you can't even really see it on camera, but there are definitely like little pills that are coming off. So not the most durable yarn in terms of like not pilling, which is surprising because I wouldn't call this like a soft yarn by any means. It's not scratchy, but it definitely feels like woolly wool. So I thought it was going to hold up a little bit better, but that's what you get for not holding something with silk mohair. I wore this to work. I told people at work I knit it and they were like, I don't believe you. Or not exactly, but I was like, yeah, I knit my sweater. And they were like, what sweater? And I was like, the sweater that I'm wearing. And they're like, you knit that sweater? Like the one that you're wearing, you knit this one? And I was like, I did. I knit this one. You can tell because at the time I didn't have like my ends woven in, and they were like, you can tell because I have like the threads that are sticking out, and they were all really blown away. I think because this is the first thing that I've made that looks pretty commercial. And I think that's why Petite Knit has such, you know, a reputation that she does. Like, I love Petite Knit patterns. I was like low-key thinking of having a rule where every given moment I have like one Petite Knit thing going, just because that way I know I'm contributing to a closet of pretty much like staple items that like will work for me. I want to have a mix of really creative and fun knitting pieces, as well as pieces that I feel like contribute to like a base level of personal style that's like necessary for, you know, going out and like living a regular life. Like I can't always be wearing like clowncore stuff. But speaking of, I guess, more unique, interesting things, this is a new whip that I started and finished without really reporting on it. This is the Cozy Winter Cap. I did talk about this in my stash plans video. So I talked about Lorelei Designs, who also goes by Dreadful Velvet. She follows me on Instagram now, which is really sick. But she does these beautiful, almost gothic vintage or like dark aesthetic inspired historical designs. And this is like a vintagely accurate, historically accurate bonnet. It's a free pattern, which is nice. And you'll notice that the free pattern has a somewhat smaller silhouette. I liked the smaller silhouette, but I had this one ball of Noro Omitama in the Silk Garden Solo in Omitama, and I also had a ball of Lanagato pink mohair. And so I wanted to make something special, and I wanted to use up, you know, a maximum amount of it. I saw on her Instagram she had a hack where instead of increasing to the 30 stitches that is traditionally called for in the mini version of the bonnet, she goes up to 50 and makes kind of a full coverage, almost looks like a headscarf, and then there's an I-cord. So it's a very simple design. It's free online, so, you know, I'm not revealing anything here. I love it. I love the shape. It's been extremely functional because, like I mentioned, I lost all of my like winter stuff from last year. I don't know where my bunny hat is. I don't know where my weekend hat is. I don't know where my fingerless gloves are. Like, I lost pretty much every single thing that I made last year, which sucks because we moved. I know it's somewhere. I just don't know where. And that effectively is useless, right? Because by the time I find it, it's probably going to be like March or something. But the original version that she made is around this size. Okay, so I know the original is 30 stitches wide. And for me, because I'm kind of able to fold it in on itself, I wanted to make a bigger one and have kind of the flexibility. But this is a really, really great project. I finished it in around 48 hours. Like, not 48 hours of knitting. I mean, like, it took like around 2 days to knit this up. Very, very quick, extremely soft, and that's because of the yarn combination. And we are having a really dreary Thanksgiving outside, but I'm going to try to get up close to show you some of this fabric. I mean, we all know about Noro Silk Garden Solo in #1 because it's like absolutely gorgeous, but with the pink, it really just turns everything this soft, hazy, lilac-y color. I adore it. I love it. It's amazing. I also, last time, forgot to mention that I finished my pressed flowers shawl, which is exciting because it's huge. Let me go grab that too. I had mentioned in my previous video that I wanted just to finish this and wrap it up, and that is exactly what I did. I had every intention of going in and doing the full border repeat, but I had messed up the numbers a little bit, and so unfortunately we were only able to get like 2 little rows of flowers in instead of like 4 rows of flowers in. Ultimately, I don't mind because I don't like the triangle shawl. So I'm happy I kind of like cut my losses here. I still wear this a lot. I wear it to work especially because it's a nice like big kind of blanket scarf shawl. I have a Sophie shawl as well, but this one just covers a little bit more space, and you know, when it's all wrapped up, I don't really mind it, especially if I'm doing this triangle situation where I tie it like this. And then you can't even really tell that I missed a couple rows at the end, but my numbers were getting so like horrendously messed up that there was no way I was going to save it. Like I couldn't duplicate stitch anything. Like the numbers were just not numbering, you know? So I called it a day. I ended it the way that I was supposed to. And the notable thing about this pattern is that I don't think that it uses the yarn that it states that you're supposed to use. I pretty much got most of the way through with the pattern before the border repeat. I think I did exactly what she, you know, had asked for, and I had used maybe half of the yarn that was required in pattern. So I'm definitely gonna make something like this again. I really love the pressed flowers design, and I'll get into that at the very end because I have some plans to share. But all in all, fabric is really, really squishy. I enjoy the design. I don't recommend making it as early on in your journey as I did. This was really, really stressful. Ultimately, it is a finished object with quite a few flaws. They're not flaws that prevent me from using this piece. It's extremely functional. It's all in alpaca. It's very, very soft, very warm, and I love it. I think I would just love it more if I were more experienced going into it. I think because so many people have knit this project and all my local yarn stores were like, it's not real color work. It's not that scary. This was scary. This was worse than actual color work. I actually think holding 2 yarns is easier than flipping back and forth in mosaic. I mean, I think my brain just really doesn't like mosaic knitting. I'm not going to update you on it today, but my night and day cowl, like I did some stuff, but like not enough because I can't stand mosaic knitting. I find it really difficult to grasp. I find knitting flat, especially in color work, to be really difficult to grasp. Like to have to flip your graphing is hard for me. Sorry, we had a home emergency and I don't remember where I was. But basically, I think I was done complaining with this shawl. I do recommend it. I don't recommend it for beginners. That's pretty much all it is. It's a flat project. The graph is difficult to like transliterate in your head every single time. You have to remember how to read it. The pattern itself is also not the easiest thing to read. It's not difficult, but like now I could probably do it again with more confidence, but at the time it definitely sent me into a couple spirals. People have really great documentation on Ravelry though, so if you are a determined beginner, I think you can do it, as I did, and you'll get a passable product. And the very, very last thing that I'm counting as a finished object, even though it's not like fully finished, are a pair of fire pit mitts. Now these are fingerless gloves. It's a pattern from Taylor Earl from Wool Needle Hands, and this was one of the first things I ever made, I think. I think the first thing I ever made was a Sophie scarf or a Sophie shawl, and then for Christmas that year I made the weekend hats and then a bunch of these fire pit mitts. And it is just a like really, really simple rolled hem fingerless mitt pattern. And I'm not done because I didn't weave in my ends and I didn't finish my bind off for the thumb hole, but it pretty much looks like this. I'm using a really, really cute set of sock yarn, and I don't know what it is. So it is a mystery sock yarn that I got at clearance in one of my local yarn stores. I made this to actually match a different sweater that I'm working on. The Amy sweater from Petite Knit has a somewhat speckly theme, and so I was hoping to create something that had a wintry color scheme. I think this works really well. It's just that, you know, sock yarn held double, so there's no like mohair or anything in it. And I knit it in the, I think, size 2. Yeah, it's just got really, really cute speckles. This reminds me of like Knit California's color scheme. It's like very, very, very pale icy gray blue with pink and purple and teal. Very cute. I love the hot pink. I love holding this double because then you get like even stronger speckles. And this uses almost no yarn at all. I really wish I maybe had turned this really fabulous speckly yarn into an Oslo hat instead, because then I would have had more of it, and now I don't have enough to make the Oslo hat. But yeah, this project works up really fast. It also took me probably like 2 days to make, and it was long and unpleasant because I had to do magic loop and DPNs. I didn't need to do DPNs or magic loop, like I can do both, but I wanted to know if I had a preference for one over the other, and the answer is I hate both, actually. I usually love DPNs, but there was something about the Hobby Lobby DPNs that I was using that was like so grating to my sensory issues. Maybe it's the like quality of the metal or like the coating itself, but there was something about the hand feel that was like sending shivers down my spine. It was just so unpleasant. Yeah, the coating was just like slippery and also grippy at the same time, and the inside was hollow and like not pleasant, and they were really, really long, so they kept clacking all over the place. Magic loop, equally frustrating because like I'm knitting what, like 14 stitches, and then I have to like pull everything over again. Like, it's annoying. So by the time I got home and I had more, because I was knitting a lot of this at work or in the car, And I remember as soon as I was able to, I switched over just to using my ChiaoGoo needles. I have a lot of repeat sizes because pretty much everything I knit is like within, I don't know, 2 millimeters of each other. So I had quite a few 4mm needles, and I was able to kind of just jerry-rig together a bunch of ChiaoGoo needles together to make a 4mm DPN set. So that's what I ended up doing because this was not it. The actual pattern itself is fine. I recommend it. And I don't think I knit it to gauge. So either I made the size medium and I made it small, or I think that must have been what it was. But ultimately, it's pretty forgiving, right? Like it's stockinette, so it's not like quite as forgiving as ribbing, but it's pretty like stretchy fabric, and these stretch out with wear, and they kind of mold to your hands as you wear them. So yes, I think that's actually finally all of my finished objects. Let's catch a breath and move on to our cast-ons. There were quite a few cast-ons from between the last time we were here and now, so I figured now is as good as a time as any to show you guys what I've been up to. This is the Bluebird cardigan. I actually posted a picture of this in my Opposites Attract knit along, which is hosted by I think Sarah's Handmakes and Smash Knits, which are both YouTubers I adore. Really interesting because they are kind of smaller podcasters. I think they both started their channels within the last like year-ish. I think they started while I was starting to knit. So there are definitely a lot of podcasters who have been podcasting for years and years and years. But Smash Knits is based in Australia. She has a really, really wonderful curation of really bright colors, extremely saturated, springtime poppy like highlighter markers. Like she is a colorful explosion. It almost reminds me of like kidcore or like a classroom like decor, because it's just so joyful and very like dopaminergic. And then Sarah's color palette is much more muted, much more neutral. It's still colorful, but she definitely has kind of a duskier, more like toned down, muted, natural color palette. And the two of them came together to do an Opposites Attract knit along. And I thought I would do something in brown and something like quite delicate, because as much as I enjoy patterns and prints and everything like that, I feel like I've been wanting lately to knit more commercial stuff, like commercial looking stuff, things that are more in line with my like regular wardrobe, which this is definitely closer to. I think I just have like more of an edgy wardrobe, and the way that I like to describe it is like spooky, scary baby doll. So I definitely do like some like frilly, curly stuff, and I thought this would be like a really nice addition to my wardrobe. It is in colors from Lamb's Pride. So this is the Lamb's Pride Chocolate Souffle, and this is the Lamb's Pride Pink Mauve color. I bought them both at Rhinebeck for $5 a ball, which is an incredible deal because it's 85% wool, 15% mohair, but it's not like two strands of anything. It's really like one single ply, or almost, it's like a roving yarn basically. So it's loosely plied, but it's really smooth. It's a very, very smooth round yarn, but the mohair kind of like fluffs up as you work with it. Anyway, I wanted to knit it in brown because I never knit in brown. This is quite a cocoa-y brown, like a dark, when I say cocoa, I don't mean like warm chocolatey cocoa. I mean like maybe closer to coffee. Like it's definitely a cooler brown. And I think I mentioned it in my last video, but I am warming up to the idea of brown being in my color palette, but I don't really like very warm orangey browns. I like more of a dirty, cool brown, and I think this fits the bill. It is my first steeked cardigan. So you'll see this line in the middle is the steeking line. I've never steeked anything before, but it so far is looking pretty easy. You basically do like some purls on the edges, which allow you to pick up for the button band a little bit easier. All right, you can sit here. And then you knit the 2 or 5 or 7 or however many knit stitches you want in the middle. For this particular pattern, the Bluebird cardigan, the designer only wants you to knit 2 stitches in the middle, which is kind of risky to me. I would have maybe done like 5 or 6 because it's my first project, but you know, I wanted to follow the pattern as it were, and to trust the process. This is a circular yoke construction. Sleeves are interesting. You only do like 5 sets of decreases, and then that's it. And I'm almost done. I think if I were to hold this up, you can see that I could probably just start my ribbing soon. And this is pre-blocking, so it's probably going to grow even a little bit more in blocking. But I did do a pre-project block, like for the yoke. And it doesn't look that different, honestly, like between the pre-blocking and post-blocking. So I'm not going to rely on that too much to, you know, change the quality or the length of my fabric. It's not super wash or anything, so that might be why. But so far, I've been having a lot of fun with this project. One of the things I did not mention to you guys is the the buttons that I'd like to use. I'm sorry for my really disgusting, unhealthy food cough. I had hot dog and I also had a bagel this morning, so There's a little bit of phlegm in my throat today. Okay, but these are the buttons that I'd like to use. I think I maybe showed them to you in my stash busting plans video, but yeah, I'm going to put these buttons in the middle. The button band is going to be brown, and we're going to finally have the chance to use these beautiful glass vintage buttons. They are like really, really nice and sturdy. And proper vintage, like maybe over 50 years old vintage. So yeah, that's my beautiful bluebird cardigan. I'm hoping to get this done before the next podcast for sure. And it's really nice and warm. It is knit in 4.5mm needles all the way through. And I believe my ribbing is done in 3.75 because that just tends to be the preference that I have. But I could not recall. It has a double folded collar, but I'm probably not going to do that to the cuffs. Or maybe I'll do it to the cuffs, but the bottom is like definitely messed up. Like I did something wrong with my Italian sewn bind off. I'm hoping it'll block out, but I'm not sure. But yeah, this has been a cast on in the last month. I finished the yoke in around a week, and then everything else has taken this, you know, the rest of the time. But I've been knitting on some other stuff as well, so it's not like it actually takes that long. I've just been definitely dividing my attention. So far, not that many balls of yarn. I think it's been 3 balls of yarn for as much as I've done now, which is the whole body and 1 sleeve. I'm saving 1 more ball for the other arm and possibly the button band, but that probably means like 4 balls for the whole sweater in a worsted weight 4.5, which is pretty good. I think that's fairly economical in terms of yarn. The next project that I think all of these are brand new. The next project that I have is the Amy sweater. Now I've been talking about this as a kind of mental health knit. I love petite knit patterns, and I finally tried to sew on a little tag here. Terrible handiwork. I think I'm going to take it into the sewing machine actually, because this is just, it's not it. But I cast this on, gosh, I want to say like 2 weeks ago. I was going through something difficult with my family life, and I just needed something really quick. And the reason why I wanted to knit this is because I finally came up with a swatch that I was halfway proud of, or like halfway pleased with. I have my little swatch pile here, and this is the Patton's Classic Wool Worsted with Make It Tweed from Rico Designs, and this is in the earthy combination. Now they call it earthy, but it's really like cotton candy colored. It's pink and it's yellow and it's like light turquoise teal. Very, very cutesy. Like it's the cutesiest colorway they have. I have the classic rainbow Make It Tweed, and that is definitely more like primary colors like red, blue, green, orange, like midtones. But this one is very, very pastel-y. And it comes out, I don't know, almost looking like those like tunnels at children's museums that spin and then like you're supposed to see stars. I'm calling this my Susu Watari sweater because it reminds me of the little soot sprites from Spirited Away, and you know they're these little black like soot balls and they carry the candies, and that's what these little flecks remind me of. It's really hard to see because it's almost like it looks like TV static front and back, but I'm trying to give you a nice little glimpse as to how this looks, and I'm hoping when I put it on, the kind of staticky effect will just give a tiny bit of visual interest, but it's not going to be too busy. I don't know, it's coming out a little busier than I would have liked, and this is pre-blocked, so I haven't really, I haven't done anything to really like see if it's going to look any different later, but I don't know. The raglan is supposed to be a really, really easy design for newbies to learn. This is my first like finished raglan, or it's not finished, but this is the furthest I've gotten in a raglan. I think I've done like the novice cardigan from Petite Knit, I believe, is a simple raglan cardigan, but I didn't enjoy it, so I never finished it. So this will be like my first finished piece. It's like a cute little shrug right now. But yeah, I'm making this in a size small. This is knit according to pattern with 4mm needles, and I think a worsted weight yarn. I don't know if she asked for worsted or DK, but it's going to have a high, kind of like wide 2x2 rib collar, and then relatively wide sleeves, which I think are going to be nice and cozy, again with kind of a 2x2 rib sleeve. I mean, if you've seen the Petite Knit Amy sweater, you'll kind of know what it looks like. I know Ninet's just finished hers, and there were a couple other podcasters who I watched who have done theirs as well. I usually can get away with an extra small in Petite Knit, but I wanted to do a proper small, and I wanted to knit it to the proper length because this one is cropped, and most of my stuff is cropped because I just don't have the patience to knit it like full length. But I really would like the sweater to be like a nice full length sweater. I have enough of the black yarn, I have enough of the Rico. I think I have like 1,200 yards of this, so more than enough to make a nice chunky sweater. And I know it now, but I'm gonna make another one because I just don't think, and I hope I can prove myself wrong, but I don't think the 2x2 rib is really going to show up very well in this, you know, tweedy design. It's a pretty busy tweed. It still definitely reads as an all black sweater, which is what I wanted. I wanted just a simple all black sweater that I could layer. And the thing with all black, when you like wearing all black as I do for work and stuff, because the color is not super interesting, like everything is black, I like to make sure that there are textural differences, or maybe like the material is something interesting. And so I thought maybe the tweed was going to be that interesting piece. And I think it made it a little bit too interesting, because now I think it's going to compete with the 2x2 rib and everything. But yeah, raglan, not super easy to make. I kind of started talking on that and then I forgot. But you need to remember whether it's an increase row or a not increase row, and you need to like not make mistakes for the entire time, because then you're going to see it in the raglan. It is a miracle that I managed to make it to what, like 350 stitches on the needles before, you know, separating for the body and then like not making a mistake, because that means every row I was increasing 8 stitches all the way around, and then remembering to skip a row and like do it again and again for this many rows without making a single mistake. Crazy I did. And I also am not super great about counting my stitches, especially when there's so many stitches on the needles. Like you get to a certain point and like to actually double check your work takes just as long as doing the work. So I think for me, I pretty much finished the whole, you know, like increasing for the raglan, and then decided to count there, because there was no way I was gonna like count every other row or whatever, because it was just too many stitches. Like genuinely, I think it was into the 300s, and I'm knitting a small. So if you're knitting like a large double XL, triple XL, like it's gonna be like God knows how many stitches. But I found out from Amy that it is a compound raglan at the larger sizes, so you know, maybe it's a little bit easier. So yeah, that's the only thing for me, is that I found it like pretty difficult to keep track of whether or not I was doing an increase or a decrease row, or an increase or a not increase row, and whether or not I had done it correctly, because you know, it may be an increase row, but I only remembered to increase 3 out of the 4 raglans. So that's on me. All I'm saying is I don't actually think the raglan is that much easier than like shaping for the back, and like, you know, I don't know, some people think like drop shoulders are like more work, or like raglans are easier, and I just don't necessarily know if I agree. I had one more thing I wanted to say about this, but I can't remember it, so hopefully I'll remember it either in the editing phase, in which case I'll cut a little thing in, or I'll mention it next time. It's not that deep. But yeah, this yarn was purchased, or it was not purchased, it was actually harvested from my grandma's house. We had to move her to an assisted living facility, and that means for me taking care of her apartment and making sure that all of her stuff is in order, and that she's, you know, able to move her apartment and sell it and everything. And she has a lot of yarn that she can no longer use because she can't knit anymore. And I got a ton of like Patton's Classic wool worsted in the charcoal and the black. So I have, I don't know, maybe 4 more balls of this yarn to finish the sweater, and maybe some accessories. So I'll have plenty of black yarn in the foreseeable future, which is nice for me. So that was a cast on as well. I am hoping to finish this not soon per se, because I don't necessarily like need this, but it will be nice to have a nice turtleneck for the winter time. It is late November now, so I'm hoping by early December I'll be able to have like a nice, you know, crunchy turtleneck that's like really big and substantial. I think that will be quite pleasant. And my funny story about this is I wound up my balls of Make It Tweed with the Pattons, which I recommend. Not because it's like a good solution, but because it's the better of the worst solutions. Make It Tweed is terrible. I don't recommend it to anyone. If you're really stubborn and you really want the look, then yes, but it is a very, very difficult yarn to work with. It's so slippery. It wants to tangle on itself. It just really doesn't want to be worked into a fabric. So the better of 2 solutions is to like wind it up. Anyway, so I kicked up this thing. I brought it to work, or I attempted to do so, dropped this in the hallway of my apartment. This clearly looks like a bag of garbage. Like, especially when I wrap it up like this, like it actually just looks like a sack of trash that someone left, you know, on their way out to throwing out the trash. And I panicked because this is so, one, I was just talking about how difficult it was to make this raglan and how I hated the process because like keeping track was difficult. 2 is that there were like 300 stitches on the needles. And so it was like getting to a point where I was just really getting through it was a slog. And then I hate the Rico design tweed because it's hard on my hands and it tangles on itself. It's just like a really frustrating product to work with. This is very much so a finished object-based product or project. And then I was terrified someone was going to throw it out. So I begged my neighbor to bring it back to my room, and she did. So thank you, Mary, if you were watching, which I know you're not because you're very elderly, but I appreciate you for doing that for me. Yeah, so that's good. Moving on, I have a scrappy project, which is fun, except I have to start over because it's not going well. But it is kind of on theme with this little bag. Now, I don't have any project bags yet. We will get into that later. But this is pretty apropos for what it is, which is the Vertices Unite shawl. Yes, yes, yes. Vertices Unite. I am making a really colorful Vertices Unite that is inspired by some bedding, some very Gen Z coded bedding that keeps attacking me on my social media feeds when I tell you that this brand will not relent, I am getting targeted ads for this like nonstop. Like they genuinely think I'm going to be buying luxury bedding from this line, which I might because they really wore me down. But I really love the color combos that they have. There's very unique and striking color combinations. And originally I was going to do something, you know, very up my standard color alley, like grays, pinks, blues, purples, navy, right? And I was going to use just a bunch of scraps. And I figure, you know, when I get it done, it's going to be just a very like pastel rainbow scarf. And when I had done it on Procreate and kind of just like sketched it in, it was cute and I liked it, and it was definitely colors that I enjoy because, hello, they're colors that I enjoy, but it was kind of boring. And it wasn't really singing to me. It wasn't making me feel particularly excited. I think part of it was that it was very low contrast. And I think the other part of it was almost everything I knit is the same color combo. Like it's this constant barrage of like lilac-y pink with a rainbow mohair. And when I saw the bedding ad, I was really inspired by just how different all the colors were, and almost like my first thought was there's no way it's going to match anything. Like if I make a mint and brown scarf, which I love that color combo, but it's a little crazy and I'm not going to have anything to match mint and brown. But I realized if I do like a ton of different colors, it can just not match anything and I'll just wear it with like black, right? Like I think this is fine because it's a lot of different colors and it doesn't have to match particularly, you know, one thing. Like if I have mint and brown, but I also have blue and red and I also have pink and green and I also have like black and white, you know, it can match whatever. I reached an issue though when I made this first part A. Part A is really mindless, very fun, a little too mindless for me because I wasn't counting my repeats. So by the time I got to this point where you need to start decreasing, I realized I didn't have the right number of stitches on my needles. And this is about the size of a Sophie scarf. It's a pretty significant like bandana shaped size. I'm knitting this off gauge, so it's important to note that I'm making the small Vertices Unite in a DK weight yarn when the original calls for fingering. So yeah, I don't think the original is actually this long. It's not that much smaller though, because it's maybe like 1 or 2 needle sizes down. But this is a pretty significant chunk of knitting. I think this took me like 2 days of knitting to do. It's all garter, so it's not like difficult, but it was a decent amount of knitting. And I knew I had messed up, but I figured it's a scarf. It can't possibly be that hard to just adjust my numbers later. You know, we're not knitting like a sweater or anything, so I don't need to like break for sleeves and stuff. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. I got to section 2. Section 2 includes these Stephen West short rows, which are unique to him. He does this unique construction where he doesn't make a double stitch and he resolves them in like a different way from other, you know, other short rows. I've done German short rows, I've done wrap and turns, and this is like his own version of that, and it's fun. But yeah, like my numbers didn't work out. I figured it's fine, like these 2 pieces connected just fine, like it doesn't matter that it didn't work out. Okay, well then you get to the 3rd section. You start picking up on each side and you knit, and there are short rows and everything, and then you're joining on the back side with your lovely little selvage edges, which he does an amazing job like lining this up and making it like super tidy and neat and pretty. So yeah, like kudos to this beautiful like design element here, and like even this attaching is like really pretty, right? But I can't figure out the numbers at this point. I've gotten to a point where my rectangle is supposed to turn like this way. It's a mitered corner, and it's supposed to be like a rectangle this way, right? I just cannot figure it out for the life of me, and I don't love this yellow. I bought this yellow as a contrast color for a bunch of color work I wanted to do, and now that I'm here and I don't love the yellow and I'm not, you know, really able to find a way around this mitered corner in a way that makes sense to my brain, I think it's time for me to pluck this out. But I did want to at least report it on my YouTube channel so I could at least show that I knit a decent amount of stuff. Like this is halfway to a scarf, right? This is halfway to a nice shawl. But these things happen. It happens all the time. I'm not someone who's afraid of ripping apart projects. Sorry, again, so much mohair on my face. I'm not someone who would rather have a project that is like halfway finished or like halfway good, but done. Because the thing about yarn is that unlike sewing, for example, where once you cut fabric, you know, it's really hard to go backwards, so you really need to be careful the first time. With knitting, I'm a little bit more blasé about it because you can always like rip it out, especially if you haven't bound off yet. And like, I'm knitting all the time. I'm someone who has a lot of time to knit and I have a long future of knitting ahead of me, you know, God willing. Yeah, it's just, to me, I have finally reached the point of emotional maturity where I'm willing to spend a little bit more time to do something right, which is such character growth for me because as a person, like if my mom could hear me saying that, she would be like, I don't know who this is because that's not my daughter. I was never that person, but I think knitting has given me a kind of character growth that I'm really grateful for, you know, hashtag Thanksgiving. But yeah, I think I'm going to take this apart, go back to the drawing board, and maybe tighten up that color scheme a little bit and see if I can't make it a little bit more dynamic, because this yellow is just a little bit too much blockage for me. I maybe would want to do some striping or something like that, but I'm not sure. For reference, the other colors that I had in here were fuchsia and navy, and then a creamy white for the I-cord, and then a little bit of a taupe. So yeah, a good mix of colors, but I think it would do well with going back to the drawing board and starting over and starting fresh, and maybe finding a way to keep track of my increases in a more careful manner. This is the one that I was really excited about. You're gonna look at this and be like, it's just a green cardigan. But it's really exciting because of the yarn that I'm using. The yarn that I'm using is a really exciting yarn. And I may have mentioned it in my last video, if I was good, and I remember what's what. But this is a cardigan number 9. And I'm glad I didn't put my shirt back on because I need to show you guys. This is the cardigan number 9 from My Favorite Things Knitwear. It is my first saddle shoulder piece. So I guess you make these 2 rectangles, you make the back, you attach the back, then you make the front, and then you make the other front, and then you attach, or you're supposed to like connect the body with the underarm, but I'm gonna steek this, ideally, if I can figure out the bluebird cardigan first. This is made in some really, really, really special yarn. This was emotional support yarn that I purchased after Trump got elected president for next year. It is 2 strands of mohair from China and 1 strand of Nutiden. Now, if you are a knitter, then you'll know how exciting that is. And if you're a normal person, you're like, I don't know what Nutiden is. I don't know why you're so hyped about it. I bought 4 cakes of Nutiden from Ourielle. I'm not sure how to say that. It's Swedish. But it is a plate of yarn. Now, I've never, ever, ever spun with Nutiden in my life, or I've never worked with actual unspun yarn before. And I wanted to do a whole video on this. Whether or not I will actually get it together to do it is different, but I've worked with this before. Now, this is Lion Brand Roving Origins. It's extremely squishy and very, very lightweight. I'm going to give you a reference for just how like lightly spun this is as well. Okay, so that's how much I had to tear. And this is the ply. We're dealing with like very, very lightly spun fibers here. Like hardly spun, right? This stuff is light as air. When I made a sweater out of this, it felt like nothing. It felt like a cloud. I was like, this has to be close to unspun. Looked it up online. Online, it was like, this is really, really close to an unspun yarn. It's not like a typical roving. It's very, very airy. You get a lot of weight for volume. Or you get a lot of volume for weight because they're spinning with so much air. This is Nutiden. This is made from a tiny, like, family. I think it's a couple. Like, very, very tiny. It's like a 2-person team. They release yarn seasonally and very limited batches. Like, they will blend together different breeds of sheep for their staple lengths and then do tiny, tiny batches of dye, and then whatever they have, they sell by the gram. There's no real yardage estimates, which is really frustrating to me because, like, how am I supposed to plan? But everyone just says to get, you know, a decent amount and you'll probably be fine. And because it is so lofty and puffy, you can knit it at pretty much any gauge you'd like, and it will generally work. Not a beginner's yarn because it's very fiddly to work with, but some people like to hold it double. Some people like to hold it with something else, namely like a silk mohair or a lace weight, you know, alpaca or something like that. And it's just really lovely. Now on the site, I saw that this was like a beautiful fresh mint. It was described as a clear mint green. And to me, that is like one of my favorite colors. Very, very hard to achieve. Hard to find commercially as well. A lot of mints, I think, lean dusty. A lot of mints lean a little bit yellowy, like more of a spring mint. I like more of a clear winter mint, like almost like gum, you know, like a lot of gum or toothpaste is like very bright and fresh and filled with a lot of white. The pictures online definitely gave me that vibe, but when I got it in person, it was still a little bit like warmer than I would have liked. I really wanted this to be crispy, like a really crisp blue-green. So because you need to hold it with mohair, I figured I'd hold it with 2 strands of an ice blue mohair. I will put the picture of the mohair that I purchased online. It is really, really nice. And you'll see that I have 2 strands of mohair, 1 strand of the Ourielle Nutiden, and it's creating this very nice icy bluey yarn. My lighting is not great. It's also extremely overcast and rainy today, so it's very gray outside. All my lighting in the house is really yellow because we don't have central lighting. I apologize. I will maybe try to do some color correction in post. but this is the swatch of my 3-stranded fabric. Really extremely light and puffy, so airy. It felt like a cloud. Working on this is like such a reward. I feel so like blessed to have this. It wasn't even particularly expensive yarn or anything like that. You know, I don't want to act like it was so prohibitively expensive to make that. Yeah, like it's not so precious that I'm like scared to knit with it. But the yarn feels so lofty, so plush. Blocking it was like a dream because it really just turned into this like bouncy, squishy, beautiful thing. Like I don't even know how to describe it. But what I wanted to do was show you just how lightweight this yarn is. I lost that tiny little strip that I had. It is frustrating. So working with this yarn, like I mentioned, it's not a beginner yarn. You know, if you look up how to knit with unspun yarn, like no one says it's easy to work with. Everyone says it's like finicky. You know, you're gonna have to find a way to work with it. But you know, people who work with unspun yarn really love it, and now I finally see why. 2 people that inspired me to look into it. 1, Amy, or 3 people. Amy Sure pairs well with knitting, and What's Millie Making. They knit with unspun yarn, and again, and Teddy Lutzak, people who spin with, or people who knit with unspun yarn, I think are ambassadors to the cult of unspun yarn because it is its own experience altogether, and it really is very unique. And I think people who do it frequently because it just feels so good. It's so hard to describe. It's extremely lightweight, extremely puffy. It almost doesn't even feel like yarn because it's basically just, it's pencil roving or what's like pre-yarn, right? A lot of technical terms here. I'm learning so much about spinning, but I'm going to give you like a tiny, like, do you see just how quickly that's broke? I'll do it again. It's barely held together. Like this yarn is barely yarn. And like all of that just turns into fluff. So that's all I've got now, right? It's just dust. So it is definitely very fragile. Like if you breathe on this wrong, it will fall apart. It comes in a cake because it literally cannot withstand being put into a ball. The way that they ask you to deal with this is to pre-wind your yarn, either 2 strings of this at a time or this plus something else at a time. And that's worked well for me. And whatever I'm not using, I put back in Ziploc bags because I don't want bugs. I think this yarn is like so skinny mini and like airy and weak that if a bug were to get at this, the whole thing would be like busted. Like it just would not survive a day on its own. And I watched Wicked opening weekend and now I just really want to knit in green, like green everything. But I promised myself I would finish a couple of other things first because I have like way too many things on the needles and it is genuinely causing me a little bit of stress. I don't like having so much stuff on the needles. I think just a lot of stressful things have happened in life and so I want to cast on stuff. And then it bites me in the butt because it's stressful to like have to keep track of all of the mental load of having things to do, right? Okay, and then I do also want to talk about my levitate wrap. I made a levitate wrap last year and I finished like 90% of it, but I was finished with every single thing except for the ties. But when I tried it on, I realized I just wasn't happy with the finished result. The sleeves were extremely tight. She does very aggressive decreases to the point where it almost fits like the way that this top is fitting, but the middle is like extremely boxy. And I just don't love that look. I would rather it be boxy all over or fit it all over. So I wasn't super pleased with the actual shape of the sleeve decreases. So I would like to try it again, but make the sleeves like pretty wide. And then the other thing that I didn't love was that I knit it off gauge. So I made mine in 4mm needles instead of 6mm needles because I didn't want that like loosey-goosey fabric. Looking back on it now, I could have just like held it with more mohair or done something else. And it's fine. Again, I didn't want to finish something that I didn't love, so I pulled it apart and I made a swatch for a new one. I'm going to make a new levitate wrap in this Roving Origins pink. Now, again, I got this in and it was a little bit nudier than I would have liked. Like this is kind of close to my skin tone and it's kind of that like sickly salmony blush color that sometimes it just kind of makes me look blah. Like it doesn't bring out any of my features particularly well. So I tried to pair it with a very cool toned, almost like purpley pink mohair, and I'm hoping this will do me some favors. The bottom part of this swatch is held double with 2 strands of mohair, so held triple I guess. And then the top is that held single with 1 thing of mohair. But I do like the effect of the color when it's more purpley, and I have a copious amount of that mohair and it was really affordable because it was from China. So I'm going to do 2 strands of Amazon mohair, 1 strand of the Lions brand Roving Origins, and I'm going to knit it 2 gauge on 6mm needles, and I'm going to knit probably the smallest size just because my favorite things knitwear wraps or her patterns I think tend to run quite oversized. I don't know if I am positive on that. It's possible that I might want to knit the small and not the extra small. But I'm not like married to either idea. Again, I cannot cast on right now. I will maybe cast this on after I finish some other stuff. But for now, this is that. And then the very, very last thing I have is a test knit. I mentioned this before, but I'm knitting the Yulina vest by Vern and Rose Knitwear, but I'm having a lot of trouble with this test knit. It's not ideal. I didn't think that this would be so difficult. And I don't want to be inappropriate by complaining about something beforehand, because like she's a perfectly nice person, but I've been having so many issues with this pattern, and I am not the only one. Out of our group of testers, a lot of us are having issues like reading the pattern. The pattern wasn't like fully done when we started, and the deadline is coming up, and there are like entire sizes that have mistakes that are still like not fixed. So at this point, between my family stuff and my grandma's like end of life plan and everything else, like with gift knitting and all that, and the fact that just the test knit itself has just not, like, we just haven't all had our questions answered. I'm not sure how much I'm going to finish this. I might just call it and, you know, concede and maybe like drop out. And I feel really bad about this because I really wanted this test knit to go well. I don't know if it's like a combination of me not doing well with the test knitting process, or if this wasn't indicative of how test knits usually go, because she seems really frazzled. Like she is available, and by she I mean the designer, but it definitely felt like we were kind of working like a first draft. There were very unfinished instructions, a lot of typos, a lot of mistakes, and a lot of us had to work amongst each other to kind of troubleshoot, because sometimes we'd have to ask questions and she wasn't available, or like she wasn't really understanding what people were asking. So yeah, this could be like an issue of me not loving the test knitting process. A lot of the test knitters being from a range of experiences. Now, I wouldn't say that I'm particularly bad with patterns. I knit a lot, as you guys can see, and like I'm pretty comfortable with gauge. I'm pretty comfortable with my size. It's like a 5x1 rib, so like that's also like not that difficult. We're not dealing with like that many new things. I'm not knitting cables for the first time. I'm not reading a chart for the first time. I'm not like, you know, doing helical knitting or something that would require me to like not really understand what's happening. I genuinely don't know why this process has been so hard for me. This is my third time attempting to knit this, and every single time instructions change just enough that I don't feel comfortable. Like it doesn't feel like I'm doing something again and I'm getting more comfortable with the pattern, and it also doesn't feel like the corrections have made anything more clear. So we'll see where I go from here. I have like several weeks until the pattern is over, but like most of us are confused. So yeah, I hope I can provide better updates in the future, but I'm not positive, and I just wanted to say that, you know, that's where she is now. I finished the ribbing and I started the moss rib. It's not coming out properly. I tore it back. I did it again. It's been causing a lot of frustration because I want this to be good. And I've been trying to be really clear in communicating. Before I had said, you know, maybe I'm going to let some other people ask some questions first and see if they get their questions answered, and then maybe I don't have to be redundant about it. And I hung back. I hung back for a couple weeks, and people were asking questions and they weren't really answered in a way that made it any clearer. So that's that, to be frank. It's not something that I like super look forward to. I have it on this wheel, and I do need to use this wheel to like push myself through it, but I don't know if anyone has experience with test knitting and what you do if it just doesn't feel like a good fit for you guys. Okay, and then the last few things I'm not really going to update on because I didn't really do that much. One was the night and day cowl, which was that the mosaic. If you don't remember, because it's been a month, it's this guy, and she's cute, and I did a decent amount on it, but it's not done yet. It is a really nice mosaic design. I love this slip stitch checkerboard, and if I can finish it, I will be really happy to wear it in the wintertime because I think it looks really, really fun and very cute. I love the I-cord, I love the yarn, I love everything about this except for the process of making it. It's such a drag, but when I make it, when I actually sit down to do it, it's not difficult and I don't hate it. I just really worry that it's not going to come out correctly because I can't conceive of how to do it. Like my brain isn't able to figure it out. And then the very last thing that I also hadn't worked on since I started a month ago was my Northern Augustans number 4. This is a really cute sweater with a very, very stretched out neckline that I really enjoy actually. And right now it kind of looks like a poncho, but it is Anna Sui inspired. So it has these little ribbons that are like color worked in, and I did them in a black and fuchsia. I am hoping for this to be kind of like an all-in-one winter coat, like a winter sweater, because it's extremely warm. This is the Lion brand bulky, or the Lion, no, this is the Lamb's Pride bulky weight yarn, and I'm knitting it on 6.5mm needles, so off gauge, but just so I can get like a nice sweater fabric in the smallest size. and it's still going to be really ginormous. So if I make it again later, I'm probably going to knit it to the pattern recommendations, and I'm going to knit it like, you know, with the right needles and a better gauge. But yeah, so far I really enjoy this. It's just not super urgent on my list because it's really, really thick and really bulky, and those needles really put a massive strain on my fingers, and my fingers are already going through a lot of pain, which is why I've been kind of avoiding it. But that is it in terms of projects. I wish we were done, but like I said, this is going to be a really long podcast because I have a lot of other things to talk about besides the knitting. But yeah, we finished the first chunk of this, which is good. Okay, in terms of acquisitions, I already mentioned the Nutidin, which is like one of the most exciting things. I also already mentioned my Lion brand roving yarns. I got one in this blushy pink, and then I got another colorway called Mushroom. So this is the Mushroom. It's a really nice cool toned brown, which I think will work well for me as far as like taupes go. I don't really wear a lot of taupe, especially not this color taupe, because I just don't think that there's enough contrast with my skin tone and my hair and everything. It's kind of like a mid-tone color, but it will be nice to have a mid-tone sweater because I don't own any right now. Ever since I kind of pared down my closet, I have a lot of really light colors, I have a really lot of dark colors, I have quite a few saturated colors, but nothing that's kind of a muted neutral like this. So I'm still on the hunt for what I would like for this to be. When I purchased these roving yarns, they were doing a crazy sale, so I got 4 balls of each color for I think $29, which ends up being 1,200 yards of beautiful 100% wool that is RWS certified for that price, which is unheard of, and I think I got free shipping. So it was a really, really fantastic deal. Michael's shipped to me very, very quickly, and I earned my points. So very pleased with that purchase. I don't really know exactly what I'm going to do with that taupe yarn, but you know, I think a basic sweater will be fine with it, and pretty much anything I make in that lightly spun yarn is going to be such a juicy, delicious texture, and it's just going to feel delicious. Okay, and then I wanted to talk really quickly about something quite emotional, excuse me, and like important to me. Like I mentioned, I have been cleaning out my grandmother's apartment. It's been pretty difficult and like laborious work, but just as a preface, we are not that close. Like my grandma and I, she has like lived in this country like since I was a baby, but in terms of like emotionality, she is not someone that I have like a really close relationship to. I talked about this in my reasons why you should knit video, which is like a year old at this point, but I talked about how we just never really had a great emotional connection, not because she's mean, well she is mean, but not because she's like abusive or anything. Like looking back, it's probably because her autism makes it so her connection with others is not really done in a very conventional way. She has a lot of sensory issues. She's not someone who really enjoys physical touch. She has a lot of issues with eye contact and expression of warmth. And I don't want to say issues with, but like generally looking back, those are the things that I think made her appear very different and cold as a grandparent. But none of it really felt like, it didn't feel like she didn't care about us. It was just like, I think it caused some issues in our family because she wasn't, you know, performing or masking in a way that people would enjoy. And I always knew it was never like personal. I just thought like, you know, grandma's just like not super warm and she's not super close, and she has like these interests that are really all encompassing, and anything that like doesn't inspire her or bore her, like she just has no tolerance for. In many ways, now that I have been diagnosed as an adult, she is like an autistic queen to me because she just does not give a fuck. She cannot be bothered to mask. She cannot be bothered to like pretend. She was never in a position where she had to. So she, yeah, like was able to study abroad, and she is like 90 something, so this was like really impressive at the time. But when she was really young, a teenager, she went to England to go study abroad. She got her degree in textile arts, which I didn't know. I know that she was a designer, and I knew she worked in fashion, and I know my mom worked in fashion, and so I always felt like art is in my blood, you know, it runs in my blood. Being a crafter and a DIYer is everything, and I recently learned my great-grandmother also made a living actually selling her weaving, which is very sick because I didn't know about that. I know all of our mental health comes from her, but it's really been quite an emotional experience seeing how what I feel so spiritually connected to and what I think is the lifeblood of my very soul being art and beauty and the way that we as people can engage with these things. It's so deeply important to me. I don't know how to explain it, and I also don't think that a knitting channel really encompasses my experience with it. You know, it feels very surface level, but I ran an art business. I have done art ever since I was a child. I've been surrounded by powerful people who've done art for their work and their living and their livelihoods. And it's just been the through line of everything that I've ever experienced in my whole life, right? I talked myself out of going to art school. I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I became a teacher. But anyway, this is all to say that to then see it be connected to my history, like my biology, my genes, like to know that it's in the blood that flows through me is like very interesting. And it's been a very powerful experience. I say this to like bring us to this haul that I have, which is that when I was cleaning out my grandmother's house, I found buttons in her sewing kit that were exactly the same as buttons that I purchased recently from Joann's. And it's been all the more surreal because my grandmother and I like basically never talk. Sometimes we will just like sit in silence together and like do what is now I know is parallel play, which is like the most neurodivergent way for two people to spend time together. But she just like will do her thing and I'll do my thing. And I never really thought we had much in common. When I went through her stuff and I realized her taste in clothing, her taste in bags and shoes, and her taste in sewing and buttons is the same as mine. And not only is it like similar to mine, like we have exactly the same taste. So I'll show you the buttons. And that's part of why the Nutiden cardigan is so special to me, is because I've gone ahead and decided to use some of those buttons that we shared in our collection. So I have these special buttons from Joann that I have been saving because they, to me, feel like they need to go on something like kind of dressy, and I would love for them to be kind of a wintry cardigan. So I was thinking it should be like a white cardigan, and that would be really cute because these would really stand out and they look quite dressy. I found like a dozen of these at my grandma's house, and I couldn't believe it because these were buttons that she probably also saved because she thought they were special, and she gave that to my mom because my mom also is someone who doesn't, you know, use stuff if she thinks it's a little too special. But these buttons, she had like a dozen of them. And they were all still in the packaging, you know, as we tend to think these things are special and, you know, they deserve to keep well or whatever. And they were so old that they were kind of like, you know, they were losing their sparkle a little bit. So I don't know how many decades she was keeping those. You know, the packaging had changed over time. You know, whatever Joann's is doing for the paper part is like not the same anymore. And she had like all kinds of special buttons that were almost exactly the same to buttons that I would pick up today. She had shiny, like almost like pearlescent buttons, like mother of pearl style buttons. She had these special little ones, and these are like a little dressier because they have like a big rhinestone in the middle. These ones are also really fun. And I have a ton of these buttons, but it was just really crazy to see that she had buttons that I would have picked and buttons that I personally would buy today. She loves black, as I do. And I just think these are so incredible. I'm really, really excited to have these. And to knit these into cardigans and to jackets. And of course, cleaning out her house, there were a ton of, you know, of course there were knitted projects that she had made, sweaters and jackets and everything that have been eaten by bugs and are no good anymore. And I think she is so old that when acrylic yarn was invented, it was like a great thing. So half of the yarn, like most of the yarn in her house is acrylic, I think, because she really likes acrylic. She only knits in black and red because those are her favorite colors. And everything she ever knits is the same shade of red and the same shade of black, same width, same everything. Like all of the cardigan shapes that she likes are the same that I like. And it's been so interesting because my mom and I are much closer in terms of like our dynamic. And it's probably more toxic. It's toxic for that reason as well. Like there are definitely things that happen with me and my mom that are like not ideal, right? Because it's just, that's the nature of really close parental relationships sometimes. But we don't have very similar styles whatsoever. I admire her for a lot of things. I learn a lot from her in a lot of ways. And there are clearly a lot of things that I get from her. But personal style was not one of them. Like, obviously, a sense of personal style and, like, the importance of personal style being propped up is there because, like, that's why I have such an emphasis on clothing and on style and, you know, your, like, personal aesthetic is because of her. And she's always encouraged it, and it's always been really, really important. And going through my grandma's apartment, we've been seeing photos of her in, like, her early 20s and 30s, and, like, she's, like, slaying these pictures, right? She looks so hot, so cute. Her outfits are on point. You know, like, she came to this country with, like, no money and somehow managed to, like, look fabulous in all of her photos. But the one thing I never had was like the same style as her. So going to her mother's house and seeing that like all of my style inspiration comes from my grandma, who I like never really like think much about, you know, like we have such an age gap and there's a cultural gap, and she also isn't like particularly warm and talkative, and she's very like kind of awkward, and all the things that we had talked about before made it so like I just really didn't talk to her that much when I was growing up. I still don't really talk to her, like we spend a lot more time together because I'm taking care of her more, but it's still very like largely silent, right? But now that I have like gone through her stuff more intimately, it's really opened up a new side of her, and I just feel really close to her now. And when I did that video on knitting and why knitting was important, and I mentioned that it makes you feel close to people who you may not have a great connection with, I was thinking about her, and I was thinking about at the time, you know, sometimes I would knit something for her and she was so happy, or we would knit together and she would just watch me knit and it would make her happy, and I didn't really even have the context of like, I get this from her, I get my taste from her. It just feels like that much more intense now. And I think it is a real gift that I have experienced this as at this time, because again, she's reaching her like twilight years, and we are now like putting her in a home where she can have like 24/7 care and everything. She's healthy, like she's okay, but we did have a couple of health scares with her, and one really traumatizing incident that was like very, very scary. And I think my mom and I are just like going through it. So that's all to say, these buttons are really, really special to me. I have like bags of them, so I had to like put them into Ziplocs because they were just taking up way too much volume, you know, in their paper packs. And it's also a reminder for me to not save things too much. I think, you know, with that big stack of yarn that I have in my shelf, and, you know, nice clothing, fancy makeup, like fancy shoes, all of those things, they just like sit in our closets until we die, right? And then we die and then someone has to deal with them. And, you know, Swedish death cleaning is like a thing that people talked about, you know, years ago. And then I think the fad kind of went away. But when you experience loss, or when you experience moving or like having to deal with end of life care, you really start to realize like, oh, we don't take any of this stuff when we go. This has to be enjoyed now. It has to be shared like now. We have to do what we love because the process is enjoyable. We have to wear what we love because it makes us feel good and it makes us like happy. And it just reminds me why it is important to get dressed and to love what you look like. It's important to have hobbies that like bring you joy throughout the entire process, and not just because of the object at the end, or like, you know, yeah, this is just, it really got me thinking about like why I knit, why I care about, like, why am I so picky? Like, why am I so picky about like the boots? I just want to buy winter boots. It took me forever to buy a pair of winter boots because I needed some. It took me like months and months to find them. I did. And now when I wear them, it's not just functional. It's like a sense of self. It's about how they fit. It was about the cost. It was about the materials and like what I'm happy to consume in my life. And it doesn't have to be this deep for anyone else. Like, I'm not saying you should care this much, but for people who do, for people who really find self-styling and personal expression to be important to them for whatever reason, it is important. And it's important not to wait until like it's better, or like to wait until there's a better time, or until, you know, you can finally wear that fancy thing. Like, just wear it if you like it. Just use it if you like it. Don't save it until you're 90 years old and you can't knit anymore. Don't save it for like the next person. I mean, like, it was nice to like be able to have these things, but there's no guarantee, right? And I don't know if I'm gonna have kids. Yeah, like my mom is probably gonna die with like a million things in her closet that she felt like were too good for her to wear. Because, you know, I think we just have that tendency to be like, I'm gonna save, you know, this dress for when I lose weight, or I'm gonna save this, you know, nice jewelry for when I have somewhere fancy to go to. And we don't always have those opportunities. You know, we're lucky enough if we can make it to our full natural lifespan, but many of us, our times are cut short, or things happen and like you're no longer, you get injured or you lose the ability to do something, and you can't do it into your full, you know, old age or whatever. And now I'm just really thinking about that. And I just have really come to have a greater appreciation for knitting and for my crafting and for what it does, not only for my mental health, but for my connection to like the people who brought me into this world and, you know, my ancestors and everything. And also for it as a form of self-care and self-expression and self-identity. It can be really deep for some people. And for me, it is that. It is very deep. It is very intrinsic to who I am. You know, it doesn't have to be impressive to other people, right? Like when other people see how I get dressed or whatever, they might think like, oh, she's got a cool sense of style, right? Like sometimes I get that compliment. And it's nice. It always feels nice when someone is like, I always love your style. Like, that's a nice generic compliment, but ultimately it doesn't hold the candle to the feeling of like being true to myself, always picking my joy and my preferences first, and doing the things that make me feel efficacious, like in my own body, to feel like I can do things with my own two hands and I can make whatever I want. And if I set my mind to do something, I can learn it and I can do it and I can conquer that skill and I can conquer my fear of like showing my body, and I can learn to love the skin that I'm in now, like at every stage of my life. Like those are all really, I think, more important things than like getting nice compliments about your hand knit sweater, right? So that's just been one of the reflections that I've had lately because of the things that I've been going through, you know, with my life. I think as far as like the touchy-feely stuff goes, that's all of it. Last really exciting thing is that randomly my husband asked me if he could teach me how to knit, which I thought was so sweet. I mean, he's been doing a lot of work on himself lately, which I'm really proud of. And one of the things is like being more mindful and being just more present. And I had mentioned that knitting is really good for that. Or maybe I don't really know if like I mentioned it or if he just kind of like picked it up, but he one day was like, I was thinking about learning how to knit. Do you think you'd be able to teach me one day? And I was like, of course, that sounds really fun. So we went online and we watched some sheep and stitch videos. I think we also may have watched a couple of other beginner tutorial videos on how to knit. They were useful, but ultimately I think the most important thing if you're like trying to teach yourself how to knit is to have someone there with you to actually like correct in real time like your posture and like how you're holding stuff, and to kind of walk you through the steps one by one. But he worked on a little swatch. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, so the very first thing he ever worked on was a swatch, and his swatch was really good, and my friend was really jealous, but he practiced his garter, and then we taught him how to purl, and then he learned how to do stockinette, and then we did bind off, and of course we taught him how to do the long tail cast on. And this swatch took us 2 hours. So from beginning to end, to learn casting on, knitting and garter, knitting and stockinette, and purling, and then casting off, he took around 2 hours to make this really lovely swatch. It's knit in 2 strands of Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool, and we made it on 6mm needles. I think it was because the project or the video we were looking at was like, please use a bigger yarn so that way you can see clearly what your stitches look like. But the problem with that is that because he was holding things double, it was making things a little confusing. So granted how difficult it was, he was doing really well. And he's a lefty. So I unfortunately did not have as much experience with lefty knitting as you know, some other people who are lefties and they learn how to knit and they learn lefty knitting. But what I did know is that continental might have been easier for him because his left hand might have like slightly more dexterity. So we taught him both. We taught him English knitting with like the throwing, and then we also taught him continental. And we taught him continental where you pick, and then continental where you kind of like use your fingers to wrap, because I can do both. And what's getting interesting is I'm now preferring continental knitting, especially if it's just like in the round knitting. So we were kind of practicing alongside each other, and his first project is the field scarf or the field shawl by Maxim Cyr, and he does these really lovely patterns that are, I mean, like anyone can knit, but like I think Maxim's patterns are like good for straight men, you know what I mean? Like they're not like a Stephen West pattern, which is like particularly bombastic. He does like very understated muted stuff. So we started with this little shawl, and it's fun because it's got increases, it's got shaping, and it's got a built-in I-cord. So you're going to do an I-cord, like integrated I-cord, I think is what they're called. And it's just a nice triangle shawl. I'll put the picture up because it's ginormous. I'm scared for him because this is going to be a freaking huge project. But my first project was a Sophie shawl, so I think he can do it. And he has like someone to watch him, and I've learned all the mistakes from my Sophie shawl, which is like not knowing the right and the wrong side, not keeping track of my increases, not really knowing how to like read the pattern properly and to like buy the right amount of yarn. So we walked through all of that, so hopefully he won't have that same mistake. I mean, he'll still make mistakes, that's really normal and that's a part of knitting, and I have really tried to reiterate that the process is not going to be flawless from beginning to end. But this is it so far. It's looking really good. He is using 2 colors, which is fun. We're going to have to show him how to weave in ends. We're obviously going to block. He hates the make one right, as we all do. It's called Satan's Stitch in our household. So yeah, I agree. I hate the make one right as well. What I don't understand is why Maxim didn't write the pattern to be a make one left increase all the way up and then do the opposite decrease. But I'm not a pattern writer. I don't know. And his yarn is the Lion Roving Origins in the heather gray and the navy. And they are absolutely gorgeous colors. Here are his little balls. They came out so good together. And these were on sale as well. So he picked them out himself. We went to Michael's because he wanted to have a nice neutral color. And he wanted to work with wool. And I don't know if he loves, I think one of the things that he mentioned is the fact that it's roving makes it kind of difficult for him because he has these like sticky, wet, hyperhidrosis hands. And sometimes the moisture of like pulling and tugging on unplied yarn sometimes gets it to fray a little. But overall the finished product is really nice. The garter is so squishy, it's so soft, and his knitting is like relatively even, like it's pretty good. So I think it's going to be a very wearable finished project. However, because this yarn is so lightly spun and you get so much yardage for the cost and for the ball, there's going to be around 2 extra balls by the end of it, but they were free because they were on sale. And so I got to snag 2 extra balls of yarn, and I was thinking of making the pressed flowers shawl. No, the pressed flowers cowl. It is a kind of infinity cowl that is like a long circular tube, and then you wrap it around twice, and it kind of looks like, you know, those old school scarves that were really in the early 2010s. I'm not really sure when this was popular, but I remember there was a chokehold on us to have like those infinity scarves. I'm having like a little bit of trepidation around bringing it back because on the one hand, you could be like, wow, so fashionable, so forward, like it's so forward that it's not even in again. On the other hand, it could be like, yeah, you clearly had an infinity scarf from like 2008 that you never got rid of, which is fine. I'm not saying that like everything has to be trendy. And I think with this pretty classic, timeless floral design, it could just look nice and, you know, nice and demure and very sophisticated regardless. I think the color scheme will really lend itself well to a pattern like that. And of course, the unspun, lightly spun texture is just going to feel really particularly juicy and like lovely on the skin. So I think for now, because it'll be around 600, 700 yards of fabric, that'll be a really great contender for, you know, the scarf. The other option I have is to buy enough yarn to make a sweater. The Luma sweater I think would be really beautiful in mostly navy with gray flowers, but I don't need that. I don't need another sweater's quantity of yarn. I have a lot of sweater's quantity of yarn, and I actually already have navy and gray as a color combination for the Luma sweater in particular. So more than likely, when I get a hold of that yarn and when I finish some stuff on my project queue, I will make that into a pressed flowers cowl, but no promises because it's knit flat again, which I don't like, but it'll be at least close to the shawl version. So hopefully there won't be too many surprises in that aspect. But yeah, I'm like someone who knits color work in the round now, and I can't go back. Like I don't want to go back. Reading the chart like in one direction is just it's so nice. You don't have to like go back and forth. You don't have to like flip the definitions and everything. It's so much nicer that way. Okay, last thing is sewing. I need to go grab my objects and then I will be right back and we will talk about it and we will wrap it up quickly, I promise. Okay, I'm back again for like the 5th and final time. I mentioned previously that we went to Joann because I had an itching to create something that came up on my feed, and it was the Mippy knit kit. Hold on, I need to put my sweater back on. It's very cold. Give me a second. I love this sweater so much also because it doesn't have mohair, but it's extremely warm because it's knit at a pretty close gauge, and so it does keep all the wind out minus all of the like fluff that gets stuck in my mouth. Okay, so Mippy, who is known as Mippy the Labeler, I call her Mippy because that's what she goes by online, and she released this beautiful bundle for Christmas for sewists and for sewists to make knitters or people who like are multi-craftual. I'm still like the jury is still out on whether or not I like that term. Like as someone who is bi, I'm like maybe it's fine if I use it because like it's me, but maybe it's still like offensive or whatever, but it's fine. It's not that deep. It's not like the end of the world if someone says multi-craftual. Anyway, this is like a multi-craftual gift where if you are someone who knows how to sew or you're trying to sew, this is really functional because you get a bunch of knit related projects in a bundle, and her bundle went for like €9, which is crazy because you get a needle case, a cable case, project bags, box bags in multiple sizes, and it's like printed home, so it's really easy. And for $10, I was like, sure, like I'll pay $10 for that. I decided to start with the flat pouches because she said they make great project bags. The large fits a sweater, and she was like, it fits a ton of stuff because I can fit my whole sweater and a ton of balls of yarn. She's like an extra small. So when I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna do that too, I cut out like fabric for a ton of large flat bags, and yeah, now that I have them, I think. Okay, I'm sorry, I yapped too long. And my memory literally ran out, which is crazy, and the sun is already setting. But anyway, this is to say that I went through the Mippy knit kit. I don't even know where I was. I went through the Mippy knit kit. I decided to make the large pouch. I have not, again, sewn anything besides that little pot holder in the last 4 years, but for some reason I thought I would be confident in quilting and making something with lining, which I've never done, and making something with a zipper, which I've never done. My sewing machine is having issues, so I have to take her to get serviced this weekend because, yeah, don't buy like an obscure brand. I bought an Eversewn sewing machine because I thought it's Bernina, and Bernina makes this like sister sewing brand for like baby like girls. It's like a children's line, but they're still fairly pricey machines and they're like solid construction. I melted my last sewing machine because it had plastic components on the inside and I was overusing my machine for too many hours at a time, and it basically fused the plastic together. So when I went to the sewing repair shop, they were like, we recommend you get something metal. And they sold Eversewns there, so I bought an Eversewn. I don't recommend it. They don't make my model anymore, so I literally can't even find parts. I can barely find a place to get it like dealt with. But anyway, there's a sewing place in New Jersey, so it's fine. It's fine for me, but I don't recommend it. Like, I love my machine so much. I think she's adorable, and I think it's great, but clearly it's not, because it's caused me many problems. Long story short, I can't work on this now, but hopefully by next podcast, I will have some nice project bags to show you and not just a bunch of reusable like grocery bags, because as much as I love my reusable grocery bags, they're not cute. They don't have zips. And sometimes my projects fall out. So this is a project bag that my husband bought me from Vera Wang's outlet. No, Vera Bradley, her outlet, and I love it because it has these like wintry teddy bears, and they're really, really cute. Not the stars, these are mine, but yeah, I think these are just like really adorable because they're like themed. And so I wanted to make my own quilted blankets and turn them, or take my own quilted fabrics and turn them into bags. So I started with this one. Now these fabrics are all purchased from Joann's, and I used just regular cotton batting on the inside. This one is lined with scrap pillowcase. Actually, this is a pillowcase that I recycled from my sister, who recycled it from my mom. So this fabric has been with us for decades probably, but they are cute. So I made this quilting. And dare I say, my lines are actually pretty even because I put the speed control on the lowest and I did not allow myself to go faster. And I installed a zipper without a zipper foot because I bought a zipper foot and it didn't work. Well, I did it on one side, but not the other, and they're clipped together for now. But yeah, this is my first time figuring out a zipper. It's not a invisible zip or anything. This is just a regular zip, but I am pretty proud of myself because it does look fine. So far things are looking good. I'm not just using her tutorial. She has a full walkthrough on her channel. You know, when you buy the pattern, obviously you'll need the measurements of her projects to use the thing correctly, but they're pretty generic shapes except for, you know, the cable cap pouch and the knitting organizer. Like the bags are a pretty standard flat pouch. You can probably find a free tutorial somewhere, but I wanted to support her because I've been watching her podcast for a while and it was so cheap. I was like, girl, you can be charging more for this. Like, I used to run my own business. I'm like, you need to like do better for yourself. But I think it was for the holidays that she had made it cheaper. And then I got bolder and I decided to do a slightly nicer zip. Now this is like an athletic zip, and this is the one that I sewed on. Sorry, so I showed you the wrong one, but this one actually is sewed on. I need to top stitch, but I can't right now because my knitting machine again is angry at me. But this one is more of an athletic zip, so it's a little bit thicker. But this one is pink and Christmas themed. And don't mind my quilting lines. I have like marker lines from my guide. But this is also from Joann's. All its fabric is from Joann's. And I'm lining them with this like pink cotton on the inside. This is just like a quilting cotton. I'm wondering if maybe, so this is being done in Mippy's way, which is that she quilts the outside fabric but not the inside fabric. This is quilted all the way through and I'm not going to bother with lining. And then I have a few more, which I don't want to show you, but I bought pretty much all of the Hello Kitty fabrics. Like, ideally I'll show you the finished projects instead of just the haul of the yarns, because, or the fabric itself, because that feels a little like I'm wish fulfilling, you know, it's cheating. I don't actually count it as like a real thing until I actually make something with it. And then the last one that I have is this really cute pink, almost like, it reminds me of a bakery. I don't know why. I guess because it has like juice boxes and stuff, but I'm experimenting with the polyester batting, which so far I don't love. One, I don't like the texture. It's a huge texture ick. So much of these like slow crafts to me are about the experience of crafting. No one needs to be buying these like materials. It's definitely more expensive to buy all this crap than it is just to buy a project bag, or even just to pay someone to make a project bag for you. Like if you go on Etsy, I'm sure you can find all of this for $30. It cost me way more than $30 or $40 to make all these pouches. I mean, granted, at volume, like at scale, maybe I'd save some money, but like the zipper alone was like $5 a zipper. So there's no point trying to like scrounge. I think for me at this point, I would rather just like make one nice pouch that I experience joy from beginning to end than to try to save money. But you know, I bought this polyester batting because there's no high loft cotton as far as I'm aware. The only way you can get high loft cotton is if you make 2 layers of cotton and stick them together like I did in my hot pad, and then it kind of pisses off your sewing machine because it's like a lot of layers to sew through. But the polyester is high bat, it's like high loft, and it also pisses off my sewing machine. And yes, it's cheaper, but now I have this ginormous thing of polyester that I'm probably not going to use up. I mean, now I will because I have it, but the polyester just feels so awful. Like, this is not to hate on poly in general and to say that, like, if you're not using poly or if you're not using a natural material, like, you're garbage and you should feel bad about yourself. But, like, because that does exist on the internet, right? Like, there are people who definitely talk that way. For me, it's just not an enjoyable experience. And I'm doing this for enjoyment, like, not because, like, I'm not saving money doing this. This is not for economical reasons. And if the rest of my products are, like, 100% cotton, I might as well. You know, it's not, like, I'm not going to recycle this because there's a plastic zipper, right? So there's no way that I could, unless I rip it apart. But anyway, this is to say, I personally don't enjoy working with this polyester batting. It's also not any easier on my sewing machine. So from now on, no more. But this is the other fabric that I'm working on. So this is the medium-sized pouch. I guess when they're done, this is going to be a large. This is going to be the medium. It's not that much smaller. It's a little bit smaller. And I did not cut for a tiny pouch. But what I did cut for were tiny box pouches. So because the yarn usages or the fabric usage is so tiny, I bought like around a yard of each fabric, and I can make a tiny little notions pouch. Like, this is going to be the tiniest little, like, almost coin purse size pouch. And I have the holiday version. I also have the, you know, pink characters version. And then the pink characters version I have in a large and a small. And then I have a few more fabrics. So I did go a little crazy with my Hello Kitty purchases at Joann's, but I had a crazy discount. Like, they were doing 50% off fabrics, and then they also had like their 35 off 100 or something like that. Like, they have a cash discount, they had a fabric discount, and then the zippers were like buy 2 get 3 free or something like that. So everything was, it was not good. Like, on the day that I really needed to go shopping, they really made it easy for me to go a little bit overboard, and I did. So yeah, hopefully this gets me back into sewing. I have a good feeling about it because I hadn't sewn in a really long time, because I think the first time I had sewn, I was just not in the right headspace. I thought sewing was going to be like so fun, so casual, so easy. I blame Makira Tours because she makes everything look like absurdly simple. Something about that girl's brain just operates in a way that like the rest of us just cannot. Like, I don't know why I thought I could be like her. She's like, I sewed a Barbie dress in 16 hours and I didn't use a pattern and everything looked fine and I had chickens in my house and my dad took me to In-N-Out and like we just did all this stuff. But in the end, I had enough time to throw together my dress and wear it to prom. Like, she just is crazy. I don't know how she does it, but I blame her for putting the wrong programming in my head around sewing. Sewing is like 90% engineering and like 10% fun creativity, which like 19-year-old me could not comprehend, right? Like, I just didn't have the like brain capacity to like sit down and like be very patient about it. But I did learn to quilt at the time. So I pieced together a couple things for quilting. I learned like basic garment construction, and I actually was like making dresses and stuff poorly. I was making like dresses with facings and I was gathering stuff and making set-in sleeves. So like the fear wasn't there. And in many ways that allowed me to be very adventurous, but the discipline was not there. So, you know, I was lacking a lot of probably frontal development at the time. So hopefully with knitting under my belt and a much kind of like higher tolerance for slow processes, I'm hoping that I will be better at approaching sewing this time. Because yeah, I think the first time I was like, I want to make a dress in a day. Like, I'm going to sew a dress today. And I would go down to the thrift store and I would pick up a bedsheet and I'd be like, I'm going to make this dress from beginning to end in one sitting. Not reasonable, like not reasonable, not useful. Part of it was that I was like in a studio. So it was like teeny tiny, or I was like at my boyfriend's place at the time, who is now my husband. So God bless him for staying with me. But yeah, we had like no space. Like, if I was going to set up the sewing machine, it had to be done in one sitting. I don't know why I did that. I don't recommend any college kids, so just don't do it. Or do it like at a place, like go to a class. Don't do it in your home. It's crazy, and I don't recommend it. But yeah, now that I have more brain, and like more space and more time and more patience, hopefully I can take things like one step at a time, and things will be better. And I can look things up, and I can take things slow. And I have a seam ripper, and I'm actually going to use it this time. But yeah, hopefully I'll be able to replace all of these like random tchotchke bags that I have and have kind of a cohesive set of project bags. So that's ultimately the goal. We have not even begun to think about gift knitting, which is bad because Christmas is like less than a month away at this point. But there's always purchased gifts, right? And I honestly think your friends and family might prefer purchased gifts over hand knit gifts. if you're a knitter. I don't know. I don't know what your family's like. My mom is a perfectionist, so if I have mistakes in my stuff, she doesn't want it. If it's not in a color that she likes, she doesn't want it. If it's not in a gauge that she likes, she doesn't want it. So maybe think about the picky people in your life and get them something from Amazon instead. I don't know. Or a small business, if you're not worried about the tariffs next year and you have the money to spare. But that is my knitting podcast. I think I've been talking for literally 2 hours. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how or why this was so long. I forgot to mention the 2 knit-alongs that I'm working on. One is the Opposites Attract knit-along, which I mentioned was Sarah Handmade or Sarah Handmakes, and Smash Knits. Fabulous, fabulous. The other one is from What's Millie Making. She hasn't figured out the name of the knit-along yet, but we have a Discord. I don't know if it's publicly available or if it's on her Instagram somewhere, but if it is, I will ask her for the link. Throw it in my description box. But that one is loosely Winter Wonderland / Advent theme. I am thinking of making the Moodiversary slipover with that one. Not necessarily because I have Advent yarn, but because I have lots of spare scrap yarn, and I think that'll be good. Or maybe I'll do my Vertices Unite for that one, but yeah, I think it'll be nice to knit along and share progress there. And then the last Discord I want to share is EcoShoon's Discord. I don't think she's doing an official knit along, or I think hers is like EcoShoon's Cozy Winter Wonderland knit along, so it's like general cozy stuff. I'm thinking of doing some mittens for that, not because mittens are useful, but because I love mittens and I think mittens are really fun. I'm thinking of doing these songbird mittens, or like a pair of mitts for, it's like a pair of mitts for Lily or something like that. It's a very, very cute colorwork glove, but I'm thinking of doing some kind of colorwork traditional Nordic glove with like the pointed tips because they're just really cute, and I feel like every knitter should have some. I'm not sure if maybe that'll be my gift knit. Like if I'm really good, maybe that could be the thing that I give to my mom, but I don't think she really wears mittens, so I'm not positive, but if they're really beautiful, she might just love them anyway. So those are the knit-alongs that I wanted to mention. Knit-alongs in general have been such an upgrade for my knitting experience and my morale. Like just having a knitting Instagram that like one has all of the knit inspiration that I really, really love. Though I will say I've been getting some pretty unhinged like memes and like shock content on that Instagram account. And because they're so weird, I definitely scroll and engage a little bit too long so I get more of it. I'm trying to be good. I'm trying to only click on sweaters, but yeah, having a dedicated Instagram account is really nice. If you want to follow me, I'll put the username down below. It's stitchwitch podcast. It used to be knits things, but it's just easier to call it stitchwitch podcast. So now everything is the same, stitchwitch podcast for all socials. And yeah, I highly recommend joining if you can find it along. I believe Casey from Young Folk Knits is hosting a Sorry Nordland knit along. So if you have like a Sorry Nordland pattern you want to do from her book Softly, I know Jackie's Making has one for Fall Feels. I think that one might be wrapping up though. I mean, pretty much every person and their mother is hosting a knit along or is knitting a knit along or has a knit along that like you can join. But it is really fun. Like being able to see the hashtags, be able to be in a group chat or Discord and just have like people to talk to and like have yarny buddies, like even if they're all virtual and like I don't really remember anyone's name. It's really nice. Like it just feels very like you're connected to real life people. Yes, this is parasocial, but I think in terms of parasociality, knitting podcasts and knitting social media is some of the like least, dystopian content that I've engaged with, and I've engaged with a lot of content. I was practically raised by the internet, baby, right? So for me, seeing so many like normal people sit down and knit is really special, and being able to actually communicate with them and see projects in real time and troubleshoot stuff and either talk people in or out of buying certain yarns or making decisions. It's been really fun, like sharing little DIYs and sharing progress pictures and, color combos and stuff like that has been really something that I haven't really noticed that I look forward to every day, but now I really look forward to checking my Discord. I look forward to checking the Instagram messages and everything like that. It's really added quite a spark. I think knitting alone is very cool. Like the fact that you can make something out of basically like strings of nothing with essentially like 2 sticks is already incredible and already amazing and so empowering and so creatively juicy and fulfilling, and it's lovely, but it's that much more lovelier when you can share it with people. For me, it's not super easy to find a community of like-minded knitters. Like when I was closer to the city and I was able to get into the city more often, yes, Downtown Yarns is filled with like a ton of hot young knitters who are like all wearing very cool, like modern, fresh sweaters and stuff that I love. But where I am now, it's definitely a lot more of like an older, quieter crowd. And so as much as I love my local old ladies, it's just not, it's not always like the same kind of dynamic as like a social group, right? Like it doesn't always feel like people that I could be personal friends with, who I can like play games with, and like I'm playing Pokemon, like anyone play Pokemon and knit with me, you know, like that kind of thing is just a little bit harder to find in person when you're limited geographically and you don't have like a huge city behind you. So, you know, now that I've moved out, it's just been really nice to have like a circle. So I highly recommend. I've never done the knit along stuff. I was really scared to do it. And as someone who was like new to knitting and like new to this whole world, I was really tentatively scared for a while, but it was one of the better decisions that I've made this year. I hope next year I can be in a lot more of these like social gatherings, and I can hopefully like make some actual close friendships, because Rhinebeck is also kind of our like thing. I think a lot of people travel to Rhinebeck, and this year seeing so many people at Rhinebeck was really cool, and I would love to continue to do that. And I would also really love to continue making these YouTube videos a little bit more like frequently, more dedicatedly. I have a long list of things on my queue. Whether or not I can actually get it together to do it while also working on all my projects is a separate thing. But this is to say, TLDR, if you haven't done a knit along, or you haven't gotten a Discord, or you're a little scared of the social aspect of knitting, please don't be. And if you are, just like lurk, right? Like just join and like don't talk to anyone, but even just having the notifications and knowing that there's a connection there, and that there are people who are so friendly and so helpful and can cheer you on and give you guidance and troubleshoot your problems, and you don't have to pay people to like teach you how to knit. Like it's really, really wonderful. I highly recommend it. I am kicking myself in the ass for not doing it earlier. So that is it. Like I genuinely need to go. I have Thanksgiving lunch to go to now. So I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and sticking through. If you made it to the very end, like you are a saint, God bless you. And I will see you on the next one. Bye now.